Hello everyone. So we're going to be moving on to World War I. And some of the key things that we need to be focusing on throughout this chapter is, first off, why was this war, which was predicted to be very fast and simple to end, last so much longer than people had predicted? Why were all the happenings in Europe in the years leading up to 1914 the reason why this war became so explosive? What were the various things basically contributing to the powder keg that exploded when World War I began? What, of course, are the reasons for the Allied victory? The US's involvement. We also, of course, need to think about the consequences, how Europe changes as a result of World War I, how the map looks different, how unresolved differences and disagreements ultimately lead us to World War II. So first, there's an acronym we can use to understand the causes. You might see another one just called MAIN, all right, so switch the letters and take one of the A's out. That's another acronym we can discuss in class. But if you want to discuss all the causes, both long and short term, you can discuss MANIA and include the immediate cause, which was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. But the other ones that we will highlight, because these are much more important, are the long-term causes. And we're not necessarily going to go in this order. Okay, we're going to start with the entanglement of alliances. And this is complicated, so please go over this again, ask questions, particularly understanding why Bismarck has a very complex system of alliances to keep Germany from experiencing too much tension with Russia in particular. Okay, so ultimately, after this system sort of divides itself into two logical parts, we have these two alliances that we're probably already familiar with. The Triple Alliance, which were also the Central Powers, and the Triple Entente, which surrounded the Triple Alliance. And we'll look at many maps throughout the way. However, we also need to sort out some of the other alliances that Bismarck formed before the Triple Alliance was solidified. And we have to think about why these alliances need to be formed anyway. So let's rewind ourselves to the unification of Germany. When that ended, we were also finishing up the Franco-Prussian War. Now, who won that conflict? Well, if it resulted in Germany's unification, you might logically guess, and you hopefully remember this, that Germany wins. Okay? Germany wins this, and there is this fear now about what this is going to do to the balance of power in Europe. Remember, this is a constant concern, right? No one country can be too dominant in Europe. This happened all the way back to the Italian city-states. So, Bismarck is a little bit scared that because Germany is emerging as a very powerful country, that France might seek revenge. Okay, it might try to get some territory back, and he's also scared of his neighbor to the east. He is scared of Russia. All right, because Russia, of course, realized after the Crimean War that it needed to industrialize and it needed to do so rapidly. And you're also going to see some territorial issues between Russia and Austria-Hungary, which Austria and Germany were friendly. So any kind of issue between Russia and Austria-Hungary also becomes an issue between Russia and Germany. All right, and of course, if you're afraid of both France and Russia, you're afraid of a two-front war, right? You don't want two different sides attacking you, which we know ultimately is what happens. Okay, so the first attempt that Bismarck makes to try to protect Germany is called the League of Three Emperors. Now, this is a very short alliance at first. It does reemerge a little bit later, which we'll get to, but at first, the League of Three Emperors, it of course consisted of three different countries, Austria, Germany, and Russia, and the idea was, of course, to prevent any one of these countries from going to war with one another. The idea in a league or alliance, of course, is to remain neutral if another country outside of this alliance attacks them. So if these are the three countries, say France decides to attack Germany, Russia would have to promise, and Austria would have to promise not to get involved. Okay, again, this is short-lived, and this is because Austria and Russia are both interested in territories in the Balkans because the Ottoman Empire is declining and there's this territory sort of up for grabs, and both Russia and Austria are interested, so this is going to cause a lot of tension. Also, there was a Russo-Turkish war that had taken place in the 1870s that led to this Congress of Berlin. Okay, Russia defeats the Turks in 1878, and what this Congress was meant to do was divide up territory in the Balkan region after Russia's defeat. Now, since the Congress took place in Berlin, Germany had a prominent role. Ultimately, Russia does not get the territory that it was seeking in the Balkans, and Russia is angry with Germany in particular. All right, so this is going to show us that despite Bismarck's effort to have a strong alliance between these three countries, there are going to be things that are preventing that from happening and lasting. Okay, so because there's this tension now with Russia with both Austria and Germany, first you're going to see a formation of a dual alliance, okay? Both Germany and Austria are scared of Russia, so they're going to become allies defensively against Russia. And this is called the Dual Alliance, formed in 1879, and 2 years later, Italy joins them. All right, and Italy has a slightly different interest. It is interested, remember, it was late to get involved in imperialism. So it's interested in getting claims in the Mediterranean and Africa, and so it feels like if it gets support from Germany and Austria-Hungary, it can go through with those ambitions. Okay, so after Italy joins, of course, it becomes the Triple Alliance. All right, but this doesn't mean that Germany wants to completely sever its relations with Russia. Yes, it's had some tension since the Congress of Berlin, but Germany still really doesn't want to aggravate Russia too much. And so Bismarck negotiates another treaty with Russia, which historically is known as his diplomatic masterpiece, because really what Bismarck is trying to do is to prevent Russia from seeking another alliance. France, in other words. Okay, if Russia and France become allies, now you're going to see Germany be surrounded. And again, Bismarck doesn't want that two-front war. Okay, so diplomatic masterpiece. Now this German-Russian reassurance treaty, again, it's reassurance because Russia and Germany, they agree that if any other country attacks them, so again, if France attacks Germany, if Austria attacks Russia, the other country won't get involved. France attacks Germany, Russia is not going to come to France's aid. Okay? If Austria attacks Russia, then Germany is not going to come and aid Austria. So it's Bismarck's way of having an alliance with Austria, but also ensuring Russia that this doesn't mean that it's going to support Austria if Austria ultimately attacks Russia. Now, this was really smart, but unfortunately, you're going to see a turn of events in Germany. Kaiser Wilhelm I is going to die in 1890. He will be replaced by Kaiser Wilhelm II. And when Kaiser Wilhelm II becomes the new emperor, he is not satisfied with Bismarck's foreign policy, and he forces Bismarck to resign. When that happens, the German-Russian reassurance treaty is not renewed, and so this means that Russia becomes a free agent and can potentially ally with somebody else. All right, so again, this is going to make Russian-German relations decline. Sorry, I already talked about some of this stuff in the previous slide. Now, when this reassurance treaty is not renewed, what Germany does then is develop a closer relationship with Austria now that Russia's out of the picture. And again, since Russia is a free agent, France is going to start getting interested in having good relationships with Russia. France will court Russia, as this says. We think of courting as like an activity before you get engaged or something, like dating. That's basically what they do. They say, look at all the advantages you will get if you take our side. Oh, look, you are angry with Germany and Austria? Well, we're not too happy with them either, so maybe we can become friends. Okay, so by courting Russia, France and Russia are going to become allies. They're going to form what's called the Russian-French alliance, which will last, as you can see, up until very close to the end of the First World War. Next. Now, you might ask, where is Great Britain in all of this? Because of course we know that Great Britain is going to emerge as one of the very important allies in the war. Well, Britain, up until this point, was remaining isolated from all these other alliances. It was very proud of its isolation. In fact, it labeled it splendid isolation. It doesn't want to be involved, very much like the United States, but yet the United States isolation lasts even longer. So by 1891, Great Britain is the only not a power that's still not aligned when we consider all the powers that get involved in the war by its outbreak. Okay? However, because of industrialization, particularly after German unification, Great Britain and Germany are going to feel more and more threatened by one another. Okay, so this economic competition that emerges in the 1890s is going to make Britain realize that maybe it does want to get involved to prevent Germany from becoming too powerful. Now, going back to the age of imperialism from the last chapter, you may remember the Boer War. Okay, this was Britain's attempt to take land in the Transvaal region just north of South Africa because of the great resources there. The Boers were former Dutch settlers that still lived in that region. Okay, now, when the Boer War resulted in a British victory, many other European countries resented the British. They saw them as jingoistic, chauvinistically expansionist. Okay, so a lot of other countries are really nervous about where Britain's going to go. We'll talk about the Kruger telegram in a little while, another reason why German and French people don't like one another during and after the Boer War. So actually, the first country that England gets involved with, that it forms an alliance with, is Japan. Okay, in 1902, they established the Anglo-Japanese Alliance. All right, and this is where Japan agrees to be neutral because there is a Russian threat to expand into India, which of course Britain doesn't like. And also, Russia is still trying to have influence in China. You may remember its interest in Manchuria, which causes it to come in conflict with Japan. So because of this, what you're going to see ultimately is that Japan feels like involving itself with Britain is a good idea because it will counter Russian threats in a region that it is interested in, and then Britain gets protection from Russian expansion into India. All right, so this Anglo-Japanese alliance officially ends splendid isolation for Britain. More importantly, however, is the Entente Cordiale, which happens 2 years later. All right, now you may remember, for a long period in history, for hundreds of years, Britain and France have been enemies, or they just simply have distrusted one another. Okay, but the Anglo-German arms race, which we will elaborate on later, is going to actually forge a friendship between Britain and France. Why? Because again, Germany is seen as an increasing economic and political threat to Britain. And so what Britain and France are going to do is forget about all of their disputes, particularly the colonial ones. Okay, they're going to stop fighting over territory in Africa in particular and say, look, let's bond, let's form an alliance because we have a common enemy or we have a common threat. We both are worried about what Germany is going to do to the balance of power in Europe. So they get rid of all those disputes. France says, you know what? I recognize that you have control over the Sudan. Remember the Fashoda crisis where Britain and France nearly went to war over the Sudan. And also, Britain says to France, we recognize that you have control over Morocco. So this is huge, all right? Now, you will see ultimately after Britain and France form the Entente Cordiale that now we need to figure out a way for Britain, France, and Russia ultimately to join together. All right? Now, all of these countries share Germany as a threat, right? Even though ideologically these countries are very different from one another. Britain and France have a lot in common ideologically, but Russia is very conservative and reactionary. Okay, so this is interesting. They both form an alliance because they share an enemy, not so much because they share ideas. So the Triple Entente is formed as a way to check the power of the Triple Alliance, prevent it from becoming too powerful. Okay, again, they all are threatened by Germany. It's also important to realize that at first, the Triple Entente is not technically an alliance, but rather it's a close friendship. All right, they all recognize that they have this common threat, and they want to make sure that they are protected in the event of German aggression. We'll move on to the arms race in the next video.